Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters from quiltingismytherapy.com, and in this video, we're gonna turn the border with the designs on our quilts. Welcome to the Floral Frames Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. Throughout this video series, I'm gonna be showing some of my favorite designs and techniques for quilting the borders of our quilts. In the last two videos, we saw some easier options for quilting those borders, but in this video, we're gonna talk about quilting a design so that it wraps around the corner. Not only is it not difficult, but it's going to give your quilt a lovely framed effect. Plus, I'm going to demonstrate the designs on a sewing machine and a long arm, so let's get to it. Hey, and if you're enjoying this video series, be sure to give the video a thumbs up. For the first option, we're going to see how to take that wishbone design and wrap it around that border corner. It really isn't as hard as you might think. So within this area, I'm going to just start quilting my wishbone as normal. I'm not even going to worry about the corner. It's like way in the future, no big deal. And I'm going to start quilting that wishbone by quilting a line that angles to the opposite side. But before I reach the edge, I'm going to loop back around and angle to the opposite side. As I approach that edge, I'm going to do the same, quilting that curve and angling down to the opposite side. This design really works best in borders and sashings that are like 2 to 3 inches. If the wishbone design has given you some trouble in the past, here are a couple tips that might make it go a little bit more smoothly. First of all, quilt those angled lines so that they're parallel to each other. Keeping them going the same angle means that you'll progress consistently and you won't end up with big gaps in between your loops. So these lines should be parallel to each other, going the same direction. It really doesn't matter how steep or angled those lines are. And just a rule of thumb, as you're quilting that line so it angles to the opposite side, the steeper your line, the closer together your loops will be and the more dense your wishbone will be. If you want your quilting to be a little less dense, you can make that angle less steep and that will spread them out and make it go a little bit quicker. But the main thing to remember is that we're going to keep those lines parallel no matter what the angle is. Now, as I'm quilting my wishbone in my border or sashing, once I reach that border corner, it's time to start thinking through the next steps to wrap that design around. I'm going to keep quilting those wishbones, working my way along until I reach that inner corner of my border. This point is like my pivot point, and I'm imagining that there's a line in between this corner and that corner. And once I hit that point, I'm going to quilt that wishbone so that it angles out and fills in that corner as much as possible. And then once I start to angle towards the opposite side, it's time to go right back into quilting my wishbone in the next direction. Try not to overthink this. Honestly, as long as it kind of fills in that corner area and you get going the next direction, it's going to be fine. One of the benefits of quilting on a sewing machine is that it's really easy to change the orientation of your quilt. If you find that you prefer quilting your wishbones in a vertical motion or where your arms are kind of extending out in front of you, simply lift up your foot and rotate the quilt. But I will tell you, for larger quilts, that can be a little bit of a hassle. So kind of forcing yourself to get comfortable quilting that wishbone in all different directions will make your quilting more efficient in the long run. The wishbone design really is a classic, versatile design that you can use in a lot of different areas. And to be honest, I've never seen a quilt that wouldn't look good with this design on it. So it's definitely one to have in your quilting repertoire. If you're quilting along with me on the panel I designed for the challenge, then we're going to quilt these blue triangles as well. Now when it comes to this part of the quilt, it's up to you. If you just want to do an all-over design, or you can experiment with some different types of designs, but I'm going to quilt some echo lines to create more borders to fill in. So first, I'm going to quilt a line that echoes the side of that area, pivoting when I get to the corner, and then stopping once I reach the other edge. Of course, if you want, you can use a ruler to get that straight-ish line, or you can quilt without the ruler like I'm doing right here. Once I reach the edge, I'm going to travel about an inch or two and then quilt another echo line. This is going to act as the boundary of my border. Once I have that defined area, I can go ahead and fill it in with the design and the technique of my choice. For this one, I think I'm going to do a pointy, more modern variation of the wishbone. It's going to start off very similar. I'm going to quilt a line that angles towards the opposite side, except this time I'm going to stop before I run into that edge, and I'm going to echo back up that side and then angle down towards the opposite side. And then I'm going to repeat that, quilting that line so it angles from side to side, and then quilting that pointy triangle shape. Now for this design, I'm going to quilt it so that it wraps around that border corner. And I'm kind of keeping an eye on that inner border corner so I know when to stop. Once I reach that inner corner, it's time to stop. And I'm going to quilt another line that's going to angle towards that outer corner. It's really going to fill in that space. Changing direction and echoing the side, except this time I'm going to angle down towards the opposite side. And now when it's time to echo, I'm going to echo this side of my border and angle back towards the opposite side. I'm going to keep doing that until I reach the edge. Now this design isn't quite as versatile as the regular wishbone, but it is nice for adding a modern kind of geometric look to your quilting, especially if you're working on a quilt that's more graphic or maybe an area that you don't want any curves. I'm going to go ahead and add another echo line just to help separate that border design from the rest of the area. Once I get to a spot where the leftover space is pretty small, I'm just going to fill it in with a filler design. If you find the idea of turning the corner a little bit too much hassle, a little bit too much to think about, we can actually just take out that step and quilt something completely different in that corner. For this next example, I'm going to work with the ribbon candy design. Another one of those versatile, handy designs that look great everywhere. Now there's something about the ribbon candy that can make it pretty tricky for some quilters. I think it has to do with the mirror image of the design, but I promise if you can work through it and learn the design, it's going to be really great on a lot of different quilts. To quilt the ribbon candy, I'm going to start quilting a line that loops out in the direction I'm heading and then comes back, almost like a backwards S, where I have like a hill and a valley or a curve and a dip. Then I'm going to take that same shape and just mirror it, continuing on, looping out and then coming back in that curve. So that's the basic shape that makes it up, and I'm just alternating between the one direction and the other direction. Now let me tell you the best way to learn this design. If you're struggling with it and you just cannot get it, I put together some free downloadable quilting diagrams that you can print out and trace over the design over and over and over again until it clicks. While I do love the curvy look of the ribbon candy, turning it around a corner is tricky. It just doesn't look quite right. No matter how I try, it just doesn't quite do it for me. So quilting something else in the corner is definitely something I like to do with this design. Now just like we saw with the wishbone, I'm going to continue quilting it until I reach that inner corner. Except this time, instead of quilting another wishbone that goes out at an angle, I'm going to pretend that I have a square right there in that corner, and I'm going to fill it with a different design. For this example, I'm going to fill in that area with an echoed box. I'm simply going to quilt the outside of that box and then echo my way towards the inside, stopping when I run out of room. Then I'm going to cross over in the direction I'm heading and return to quilting those ribbon candy in the next direction. Again, quilting that line so it curves out in the direction I'm heading and swoops back. There's just something about the ribbon candy and the wishbone that kind of mixes my brain up sometimes, especially when I was new to quilting. I'd start quilting a ribbon candy and realize it would turn into a wishbone or vice versa, but I promise if you're struggling with the design, keep practicing. Eventually it will click and it'll be no big deal. When quilting this design, you can feel like you're doing everything right, but it still doesn't quite look the way you think it should. If that's the case, be sure to download the free diagrams and tip sheet because I'll give you some troubleshooting tips on how to handle those common frustrations for quilters. Now for this option, we're going to actually treat that border corner as part of a motif. This is especially helpful for those designs that are directional, like serpentine lines or even feathers. I happen to think this technique looks pretty cool. However, it's not really meant for designs that wrap all the way around because we're switching directions. But if you have a section with a corner, maybe it's a pieced block, or it's something like the panel where it's a defined area, it's a perfect option. I'm going to demo this technique with the serpentine lines design. Another great versatile design that works on those thinner kind of borders. I'm going to start quilting my serpentine lines starting from one edge of my area. I'm going to quilt a line that curves out towards the center of my border. Then I'm going to switch direction and quilt it so it looks like it's merging into that other spine. That one change of direction is what's going to give it that nice curvy kind of look, and it also helps us progress down the border. Once I reach the other side, I'm going to travel along that edge just a bit and then echo the line I just quilted. Once you get the first line down, the rest is just echoing. I want to quilt it so that one side of my line is higher than the other. And I'm also going to try to keep my spacing between the lines fairly consistent. Again, I'm not stressing out about this. I just know it's going to look better if they're somewhat similar in their spacing. And just like we saw with the ribbon candy and the wishbone, I'm going to keep quilting until I get to that inner border corner. So once I get to that point, I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to treat this portion of my border almost as the centerpiece of my motif. So right from here, I'm going to quilt a line that curves out to the opposite side and back to my starting point. And depending on how large that area is, I could add some echo lines or add some filler. Really just depends on the look I'm going for. I'm just trying to quilt that part of the design so that it fills that border corner up as much as possible. Now I'm going to change direction and work my way along the other side of my border corner. If I'm being honest, this point right here is where it can get a little tricky. because the part of my design that hits the outer edge is higher than the part of the design that's on the inner side. So it's kind of extending up towards the outside. I want to do the same on the other side. So I'm in essence quilting the mirror image of that shape, which can be tricky if you're still struggling with the design, you're not sure how to quilt it. I really love this technique because it adds such an elegant look and also kind of draws your eye to this particular corner. So it's a great way to highlight portions of your block that you love. And I can't say this enough. If you're struggling with the design, please download those free quilting diagrams because I promise tracing over the designs in there will really help it click and will make all the difference in the world. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like quilting this technique on a long arm. Spoiler alert, it's not a whole lot different. Now it's your turn. If you're quilting along with me on the panel I designed for the challenge, go ahead and fill in the areas highlighted in red with the border designs of your choice. You can try turning the corner or not, and you can use the designs I've showed in the video or come up with your own variations. And don't forget, I have that free downloadable quilting diagram and tip sheet with all the tips that I shared during this video. And if you need a little bit more help, I have an expanded resource PDF that has even more tips, even more diagrams. It's going to be a great resource for you. Well, I'll be back soon with the next video in this challenge when we're going to talk about quilting a lovely, elegant swirl chain in those areas. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.